What's up YouTube, Zero here, and today I have an absolutely amazing Gengar and Sylveon EX deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll talk about why this deck works so well as a whole. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Gengar is one of my favorite Pokemon. If you've watched my previous videos, you already know that. So I'm trying any combination I can to come up with fun Gengar decks that really do work. This Gengar deck is one that features a non-EX Gengar. It's the Gengar from the Genetic Apex Mewtwo packs, the non-EX style. And for just one Psychic Energy is Bother. And Bother deals 50 damage. However, your opponent can't use any supporter cards from their hand during their next turn. Preventing your opponent from utilizing supporter cards can really turn the tide of battle. There are a lot of supporter cards in the game that a lot of opponents, of course, rely on. You can see in my deck list on the left-hand side of the screen, numerous supporter cards that can really change the tide of battle. Professor's research that draws 2 cards. Of course, the more cards you draw, the more you get into your deck, the quicker you're going to be able to implement your strategy. Cyrus, you can pull out a damaged Pokemon from your opponent's bench to the active spot, making it easy to finish off a weakened Pokemon. Sabrina, you can force out a Pokemon in that active slot to the bench. So there are numerous supporter cards that you're going to prevent your opponent from being able to utilize. This is going to be absolutely awesome while running through your opponent's HP. Of course, you prevent Pokemon Center Lady as well, that heals up 30 damage. You can prevent an Ilima, which Ilima allows your opponent to take a damaged colorless Pokemon, normal type Pokemon, from the playing field and put it back into their hand, which essentially heals up that Pokemon. So you're preventing a lot of your opponent's strategy. Of course, you're not preventing all of it, as this is limited to preventing supporter cards from being used, but it can really throw off your opponent's strategy. So I absolutely love this Gengar, and it's phenomenal to stop your opponent in their tracks, especially if your opponent is bricking on evolutions. Of course, you do need a Ghastly, so I have the Ghastly from the Genetic Apex Mewtwo packs as well. This Ghastly for 1 Psychic Energy or Ghost Energy, Suffocating Gas for 20 damage. So what's really nice about this Gengar as well is that as soon as you get Gengar, it is only 1 energy, so it's pretty easy to get online and dealing damage with that Pokemon. So it's really awesome to get Gengar, really quick to get Gengar into that active slot, dealing 50 damage and preventing your opponent from utilizing those supporter cards. Now, to evolve from Ghastly into Gengar, of course I do have 2 of each. Gotta have Rare Candy since I don't have Haunter in this deck. Rare Candy is going to be found in the Celestial Guardians packs. Rare Candy, phenomenal card. I've mentioned it before in my other videos. For those of you who are new to my channel and don't know what Rare Candy does, in this deck sense, if Ghastly has been on the playing field, so the basic Pokemon has been on the playing field for at least 1 turn, if Rare Candy and Gengar are in my hand, I can utilize Rare Candy to evolve Ghastly right into Gengar rather than utilizing the Stage 1 or Haunter. So I can forego having Haunter in this deck and evolve right into Gengar as long as I have Rare Candy and Gengar. So that's going to be nice, so I can implement Gengar a little bit quicker, utilize the 1 energy and Bother, to deal 50 damage and prevent my opponent from utilizing supporter cards. Next, let's talk about Sylveon EX, an absolutely phenomenal card, and it's one of the best cards in the game right now. It's utilized in decks that don't even run Psychic Energy or Fairy Energy in Sylveon's case because of its ability. Now, Sylveon has an ability, Happy Ribbon. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may draw 2 cards. So Sylveon EX is essentially a free Professor's Research. So you can utilize Sylveon EX, you evolve, you draw 2 cards. You can still use Professor's Research on that turn, so that turn you can actually draw 4 cards. So that's pretty awesome. It's a free Professor's Research. And of course, the more cards you have in your hand, the more easy it is to implement your strategy. And what's awesome with this deck is if Gengar has been attacking, you can avoid being Marsed. And Mars is a card where if your opponent plays Mars, you only get to draw, you have to shuffle your hand into your deck, and you can only draw the amount of cards for points you have left to win. So if you have 3 points left to win, you shuffle your hand into your deck, you get to draw 3 cards. If you have 2 points left to win, you only get to draw 2 cards. If you have 1 point left to win, you only get to draw 1 card. So Sylveon is able to load up your hand, and then Gengar is able to attack your opponent's active Pokemon, preventing supporter cards, including Mars. So you're going to have a loaded hand and not have to worry about a Mars being activated. Sylveon also has an attack for 2 energy. Fairy Wind deals 70 damage. 1 Psychic, 1 Colorless. Sylveon EX is going to be found in the Eevee Grove packs. Now, of course, you need to evolve into Sylveon EX, so I have Eevee that for 1 colorless energy has Find a Friend. You put a random Pokemon from your deck into your hand. So this is going to be extremely important if you start with Eevee. You're going to be able to find maybe a Ghastly, maybe a Gengar, maybe a Sylveon. There aren't many Pokemon in your deck that you can find, so it's going to allow you to implement your strategy even quicker. If you have an Eevee on the playing field, finding Sylveon would be really nice, so you can utilize Happy Ribbon and draw a couple of cards. And of course, the more cards you draw, the quicker you're going to be to getting Ghastly on the field, getting Gengar on the field, and preventing your opponent from utilizing those supporter cards. And this Eevee is going to be found in the most recent packs, Wisdom of Sea and Sky. So just be aware that I do really love this Eevee and its Find a Friend. Next, I have Pokeball. You put a random basic Pokemon from your deck into your hand. Of course, I mentioned earlier, Professor's Research, you draw 2 cards. Next, let's talk about Giant Cape. Giant Cape, the Pokemon the card is attached to, gets plus 20 HP. This is going to be pretty nice for both Sylveon and Gengar because it can get you over a couple of breaking points. Gengar has 130 HP with Giant Cape goes to 150. Sylveon EX at 140 HP goes to 160. So it's going to be able to allow you to avoid some of the one-hit KOs that, of course, you're going to want to avoid. Just thinking off the top of my head by certain Pokemon, Giratina deals 130 damage. Of course, that could one-hit KO Gengar. With Giant Cape, you're going to avoid the one-hit KO. Charizard EX, your Stoke Charizard EX deals 150 damage. So if you have Giant Cape on Sylveon, you're going to avoid that one-hit KO. Of course, avoiding a one-hit KO could be crucial to winning the battle. With Gengar attacking, you're going to prevent a lot of healing off of your opponent's Pokemon as well. So they can't use Pokemon Center Lady, they can't utilize Lily, so they're going to be stopped in their tracks in terms of healing up their Pokemon. So even though some of these Pokemon do have a lot of HP, they're not going to be able to heal. So while other decks may deal a lot of damage, you can already see this deck doesn't deal a lot of damage. What those other decks don't accomplish is they don't prevent their opponents from utilizing those healing supporter cards, where this deck does. This deck is going to stop my opponents in their tracks. It's going to stop them from utilizing Lily, which heals up 60 HP. It's going to stop them from utilizing Pokemon Center Lady, which heals up 30 HP. So it's going to be really nice for that. So even though it's going to take a little bit longer to KO certain Pokemon, you're not going to have to worry about some of those healing agents that some of the prominent decks have. So that's going to be nice for this deck as well. Again, this deck doesn't deal a lot of damage, but what it does do is it prevents a lot of what you're going to encounter that other decks have to encounter. It's going to prevent healing. It's going to prevent your Sabrina or your Cyrus that's going to try and throw off your strategy. It's going to prevent your opponent from utilizing Professor's research so your opponent can implement their strategy. There's a lot that this deck is going to force your opponent into that they're not going to want. They're going to have to manually, one card at a time, draw from their deck. They're going to hope they get the right card. They're going to have to evolve into their Pokemon and one energy at a time equip and hopefully get what they need. Of course, all the while you're implementing your strategy while you're stopping them in their tracks. So that's why I love Giant Cape. It's going to get you over some breaking points. And of course, you don't have to worry about Giovanni or Red because of Gengar, as long as Gengar had attacked the previous turn. Giant Cape is going to be found in these Space-Time Smackdown Dialga packs. Next, I mentioned them earlier, but Sabrina and Cyrus. Two great cards for this deck. Again, this deck isn't dealing a lot of damage, so utilizing Cyrus to get a weakened Pokemon from the bench to the active spot is going to be phenomenal, and it's going to be very useful. Cyrus, you switch in one of your opponent's benched Pokemon that has damage on it to the active slot. So that's going to be nice. So you can make sure that any weakened Pokemon you can throw back out there and finish off. Cyrus is going to be found in these Space-Time Smackdown Palkia packs. Next is going to be Sabrina, which you switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. So your opponent chooses the new active Pokemon. This is going to be really nice as well. You can force a Pokemon to the active slot that your opponent doesn't want there, or you can just force out a Pokemon that you don't want to deal with at that current time. Maybe it has a tool on it that you don't want to deal with. Perhaps it has a decent amount of energy built up and your opponent's benched Pokemon don't. So you're going to force that Pokemon to the active slot. So your opponent has to utilize energy to retreat that Pokemon. There's a lot of uses for Sabrina, but it's an absolutely phenomenal card. And Sabrina is going to be found in the Genetic Apex Charizard packs. Last but not least, Lyra. Lyra, you switch your active Pokemon that has damage on it with one of your benched Pokemon, and this card is going to be found in the Wisdom of Sea and Sky Lugia packs. There's a really nice reason to have this card as a part of this deck. I do only have one Lyra and I have one Cyrus, just note that. Gengar with Bother requires 2 energy to retreat. So instead of having to equip 2 energy on my Gengar to retreat to lose all my energy, I would rather be able to utilize that energy to put on another Pokemon, whether it's a second Gengar to put in the active slot, whether it's a Sylveon to put in the active slot, so I can save the energy. One, save myself from having to equip another energy on Gengar to retreat it, and 2, save the energy that's already on Gengar, so if I do have to put it back in the active slot, I don't have to re-equip one. So it's nice. Lyra's nice for several reasons, but mainly to retreat Gengar when it does have damage on it, so that is going to be nice as well. You can also retreat your Sylveon, again preventing that energy loss. This deck is extremely fun and has a lot of uses. It really stops cards and opponents that utilize a lot of support cards because they have to figure out a certain strategy as to how they're going to get around not being able to utilize those supporter cards. You're able to get through your deck pretty quickly thanks to Sylveon. You're able to stop your opponent in their tracks by utilizing supporter cards thanks to Gengar, and you're just going to be chipping away at damage. You don't always have to deal a ton of damage to be able to defeat a lot of opponents. I've actually won a decent amount of games with this deck because I'm just stopping opponents in their tracks. They're not able to utilize their strategy or implement their strategy to full. They're just throwing Pokemon out there, equipping energy, and slowly building up, while I'm just implementing my strategy extremely quickly with Sylveon EX, with my supporter cards, and with Gengar in that active slot, dealing damage. So this is a phenomenal deck. It's another great use of Gengar. Gengar has a lot of uses and can fit into a lot of decks, and so can Sylveon EX. Both cards are absolutely great. Pairing them up, this is a really fun deck and one that I've been utilizing a lot and winning a lot with. Surprisingly enough, I know you may be looking at this deck saying, this doesn't deal a lot of damage, how am I going to win? But surprisingly enough, you don't have to deal a lot of damage to win battles. Stopping opponents in their track, whether it's from healing, whether it's from being able to retreat their Pokemon, whether it's not allowing them to utilize a card such as Ilima to draw a Pokemon back out of that active slot, you're really going to be hurting opponents and getting through them a lot quicker than you think. Let me know in the comments section if you've utilized a deck similar to this. Do you like this Gengar as much as I do? This Gengar is surprisingly good. I know a lot of people overlook this Gengar, but it is a surprisingly great Pokemon to have, especially in a psychic, ghost, fairy deck, whatever you want to call this type of energy, since Gengar is typically viewed as a ghost type Pokemon and Sylveon is typically viewed as a fairy type Pokemon. So this is a great ghost fairy deck. This Gengar is absolutely awesome. Let me know in the comments section if you've utilized this Gengar, and if you have, what do you think of it? Would you rather have EX Gengar in this deck over this Gengar? Let me know in the comment section. The reason why I like this Gengar is just because I can start chipping away with only 1 energy, whereas Gengar EX requires 3 energy to deal 100 damage. Granted, as long as Gengar EX is in the active slot, your opponent can't use supporter cards, but this Gengar, as long as you're attacking, you can stop your opponents in their tracks. But let me know what substitutions you'd make in this deck to make it even better. Let me know if there's a Pokemon you'd like to see a deck build around. If you do, leave a comment and I will get that deck build done. Regardless of the Pokemon, just let me know in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Until next time, peace.